The year is almost over, and I have to say, it's been a pretty good one for the Pokemon fan project scene. But of course, we're not done yet, as I'm here to showcase a total of 9 Pokemon fan games and ROM hacks that were released or updated in the last 30 days. As always, be sure to subscribe to never miss out on any new fan projects, since this is a monthly series. But before we continue, I'd like to take a moment to talk about an upcoming monster taming game, Doki Monster's Quest, that just released on the Nintendo Switch as of yesterday, November 27th. This is something that many fans of the game have been asking for, and as the sponsor of today's video, I'm glad to finally be able to notify you of it. But in this game, you'll travel through a massive pixelated world with over 15 towns, catching over 140 original and unique monsters, and experience a story with around 20 hours of content. But unlike the older Pokemon games its art style resembles, Doki Monster's Quest comes with a plethora of quality of life features, such as a battle speed up button, quick and easy stat editing, and a quest log to make sure you always know where to go next. And if you ever get bored of your surroundings, you can always change the style of the overworld as well as swap between a piano or 8-bit soundtrack. But like I said at the beginning, the game is just launched on the Nintendo Switch eShop, allowing you to enjoy this retro monster taming experience on a handheld device for only $12.99 USD. And even if you played it in the past and had a negative experience, the game has received significant free updates since its original release. So if you're looking for a retro monster taming experience with more modern gameplay features, then check out the link in the description or pinned comment to begin Doki Monster's Quest on either PC or your Nintendo Switch device. Let's start off strong with a completed Pokemon fan game called Hero Legacy. Your journey takes place in the brand new region of Aorawa, a place that at first had me feeling a bit uninterested. But after reaching the third town about half an hour in, those feelings quickly left me. I guess the first few routes were just a bit boring in design compared to everything else in the game. The region moving forward though was quite vibrant, with a lot of interesting route designs that I personally enjoyed my travels through. My only complaint about the overall journey was just how many trainers there were between each gym. The EXPL made it very easy to reach the next level cap, and the difficulty of the game didn't warrant the need for multiple teams. Other than that, I thought the adventure was fine and didn't feel like a chore in any way. What I found to be mostly unsatisfied with though was the story. From a glance, the initial plot seemed pretty unique, as rather than taking on the role of a newbie trainer, you're instead one who's conquered the leagues of other regions and will now begin a new adventure in this one, with, of course for gameplay reasons, a brand new team. But I quickly realized that didn't really make too much of a difference in the grand scheme of things, as you're still playing as a trainer traveling to collect 8 gym badges, which honestly isn't that big of a deal and not something that'll bother most people. The part that did bother me was how every rival and gym leader were just characters from the official games. So if you look for good storytelling in fan projects, I don't think this is one you'll enjoy. If not though, then the quest book telling you exactly where to go next makes it pretty easy to ignore if you happen to also find it uninteresting. Altogether, I think the game was pretty average. Not bad, but not mind-blowing either. It's something that I think can be best enjoyed by a casual player looking to explore a new region and catch tons of Pokemon that doesn't mind the lack of a deeper story or a more original structure. Up next is a brand new ROM hack called Pokemon Hearth. Almost immediately after starting up a new save, I was taken back by the project's charming artwork. I really liked the style that was used to create both the overworlds and dozens of mugshots given to almost every unique NPC, not to mention the custom UI designs, really immersing me in this hack's ancient Japan setting. As for the routes and towns, I thought some of them were a bit rough around the edges, but nothing that drastically harmed the experience, or really anything that most people would even be bothered by. The region reminded me a lot of Hoenn, and whether or not that's on purpose, I'll still compliment the creator's attempt to replicate its style of mapping without some of the overlooked clunkiness of those older games. But this hack also has a lot of Pokemon to collect. I'll admit that the variety is kind of lackluster before the first gym, especially when choosing the grass starter, though once you're past that point, the amount of options to choose for your team greatly increases. On the topic of Pokemon, Hearth contains a collection of regional forms and even a few Betamon brought back to life after getting cut from the older titles. Combine that with a pool of canon mons from all 9 generations, locations, I can't say you'll have much of an issue putting together a powerful and fun to use team. However, this hack does lack the EXP all, which I thought was important to mention, as it's become more and more expected, especially in these more custom looking projects. Even though I'm a huge fan of said feature, its absence is thankfully catered to with a catch-up system, allowing lower level team members to gain significantly increased EXP. And finally, like most hacks and fan games I cover, the difficulty in this one isn't too challenging, with all of my struggles being easily solved by just bringing a balanced and diverse party. Hearth shows a lot of potential for the future, and if you don't see yourself waiting for the completed version, then its current 3-gym demo will provide you with a short but overall very fun experience. If you've been even somewhat active in the recent ROM hacking community, I'm sure you've heard of a hack called Emerald Sea Glass. Applying a second-generation art style to the original Hoenn games, it was a simple but very fun hack. As most of you are already aware though, the creator would go on to release a more original project by the name of Pokemon Lazarus. Taking place in the new region of Ilios, you'll encounter Pokemon from up to the 9th generation, and travel across dozens of diverse locations on your journey to collect 8 gym badges. While the story is quite reminiscent of the older Pokemon games, the journey and gameplay experience were very comfortable and casual friendly, making it one of my favorite hacks released this year. Although it's also one I just recently made a video on, so rather than repeating myself for an extra few minutes, I'll instead suggest you to check that out in order to learn more about the hack's features and almost infinite gameplay customization. Moving on is a brand new update to a project called Miragia's Traveler. I covered this one a few months ago, and I have to say I was pretty impressed with what I played. Like most Pokemon games, your story begins in a small town, where after being handed your starter, you set out to begin your career as a trainer. Unlike most Pokemon games though, this journey isn't about collecting 8 gym badges and then challenging the league. Instead, you'll join the Trainer Union, an organization that protects people and Pokemon from various antagonist groups or natural threats. The structure and writing of the story was very reminiscent of the Mystery Dungeon series. The characters were very charming with healthy development and unique personalities, alongside the end of each arc bringing you back to a central location, rather than telling you to just keep moving forward. I also really have to compliment the artwork. It's clear that a lot of effort was made to really convey the emotions of every important character. The game isn't only unique in its story design, but also the way the world is structured. Rather than traveling through mostly narrow and straightforward routes, the wilderness between major settlements is very open. Filled with side quests and powerful overworld encounters, each area felt worthwhile to explore to the fullest extent. And due to how expansive these maps were, you could easily spend as much time as you wanted completing the content within them, before being forced to continue the main story. With such big maps though, most players are going to expect them to be packed with varying Pokemon species. Lucky for you, those expectations will not be let down. Each route had a healthy variety of Pokemon to capture, and you'll find plenty of different spots in between major boss fights to quickly grind for EXP. Not to mention, the overall difficulty of the game felt very casual player friendly, to the point where I could overcome most battles using a team of Pokemon I liked. But if you happen to have played this game before or watched a past video where it was included, the newest update released this month provides an entire new section of the region to explore, more Fakemon that look really good in my opinion, and of course a bunch of bug fixes. So if you aren't afraid of unfinished games, then I highly suggest Miragia's Traveler, as I really feel it's a sort of hidden gem in the fan game scene. Before we move on to the final game this month, I wanted to quickly go over a few honorable mentions. Projects that are a bit smaller in their content released in these last 30 days, but in my opinion still deserve to be here. The first one is Crystal Advanced Redux. This hack has the vibe of your average enhancement or difficulty hack, but of course takes place in Johto rather than Kanto or Hoenn. As you might expect, you'll find harder boss battles, rebalanced stats and move pools, a stronger variety of encounters, and even the EXP all. If you're wondering why you should play this over something like Heart and Soul, well, I personally found this one's Pokemon rebalances to be a lot more interesting, taking inspiration from those of the Drayano hacks. So if that's something that speaks to you, I think it's worth a try, as the hack has a pretty active community, constantly providing updates each month. Speaking of Heart and Soul, it also received an update this month. Of course, the hack is already completed, but this new release adds a bunch of new content. This includes new pre-game settings for Nuzlocks, randomizers, and even infinite rare candies, learn set buffs to over 100 Pokemon, the Battle Frontier, and many more smaller changes. I already thought the hack was good enough to be the definitive Johto experience, and this update just makes it even more worthy of that title. So if you haven't played the hack already, I highly suggest jumping right in, or at least watching my full video about it, linked in the description below. The next one is Mystery Dungeon Origins. Now, this is not a ROM hack, rather a PC fan game created to avoid some of the limitations of modifying an existing game. And I've got to be honest, it really shows. A lot of moves have been modified to feel more unique with different ranges of their area of effects, alongside many custom items to spice things up. The most interesting feature though, that's probably the biggest thing separating this game from the official and even modded PMD titles, is the catching mechanic. Rather than having a random chance to recruit team members, you can simply throw an apricot at them like you would with a Pokeball. The only big negative this game has is that there really isn't a story to follow, which is something the spin-off series has always been known for. But if you're a fan of its gameplay mechanics, then I highly suggest trying this game out, as it's just received a brand new update this month. And the final honorable mention is Golden Shield. This is a hack of Heart Gold that replaces the entire regional dex with that of Sword and Shields. So of course, you can expect every encounter pool and trainer to be updated to the 8th generation, and thankfully almost all the Pokemon included can be obtained before Kanto. Although one important thing I need to note is that I found most of the boss battles to be pretty easy, not feeling any more difficult than the base game. Having played so much Johto recently, I personally didn't find it too interesting myself. But at the end of the day, it's still another small step for the NDS ROM hacking scene that deserves some attention. A few months ago, I covered a fan game called Pokemon Hollow Woods, and while I didn't come out disappointed with what I played, I certainly didn't feel satisfied either. Just recently though, the creator would drop a brand new update, fixing a lot of the game's issues. But before we dive into those, if you aren't familiar with this project, it takes place in a brand new region where you'll play as a Pokemon trainer with the initial goal of researching its unique species of Pokemon. Like last time I covered it, the story was decently alright, with a healthy amount of world building. The writing did a good job exploring the tensions between the different factions of the regions, but I can't say I was moved by any of the characters. Although I will admit that my personal standard for storytelling in these games is a bit higher than many. So while I may have been left emotionally unscathed, you yourself might find it much more intriguing. Where I was impressed by this update though, were the graphical improvements. The routes and towns already had well-constructed layouts, but were kind of held back by the lack of color or extra details that contrasted each other. This time around, I was much more absorbed in the world. It felt a lot more in tune with the 4th generation art style, with a lot more color and charm compared to the dull grayness that sort of plagued it in the past. Another place the game significantly improved visually though, were the new Pokemon forms. They were already pretty fun to use in battle, while now looking way more unique and no longer barely more than recolors. Of course, some of them are still pretty simple, but that is to be expected from a free-to-play fan game, and I didn't have any issues with the designs currently in the game. To close things out, the start of the game now also gives you access to optional level caps, infinite rare candies, a randomizer mode, and even a setting that heals your team to full after every battle. I personally found the last one to be a really big improvement to my overall experience, as after playing through so many fan games, it's nice to sometimes be able to sit back and not have to worry about healing your team after every fight. While the current game is still unfinished, the 7 gyms worth of content available is definitely worth playing if you're looking for a casual gameplay experience set in a new region. But that's just about going to wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, be sure to subscribe for more weekly Pokemon fan games and ROM hacks. Thank you to my channel members for their continued support, and have a nice rest of your day.